welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. Today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, and this one is a really interesting one. Should the Supreme Court be packable? Should there be a permanent amendment to make sure that it can't be packed going into the future? It's going to be one discussion about one article. We're going to go through a few different nuances, possible proposals, and of course we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. But with that said, let's jump into our dip, dive, and dodge segment. Roll the intro here. All right, I think we had enough time for it. So how it works. There will be a policy proposal that is asked in the form of a question. I'll say I'm a reporter. I have ChatGPT giving me some random topics. The first one will be from the reporter, the question that's asked to whatever persona I'm taking on. The second one will be the thing that I have to pivot to. I have to dip, dive, and dodge away from whatever they want me to talk about and get onto my talking points for the day. My comms manager handed them to me right before I went out, and boom, 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 we got to spin it. And then there's going to be a little bit of selfish promotion in there. You know, politicians are always promoting something that they're doing, their book, so on and so forth. So I also have to somehow jam that in there and make it seamless. So if you don't understand how it works, well, we'll just roll into it. So I'm going to take on the persona of the reporter right now. So, Governor Smith, we know that your agenda coming into office after this recent election has been very focused on the federalist system and allowing the states to have a lot of play and wiggle room in what is allowed to do in times of great difference with the federal government. And your constituents are wondering if you will actually implement some of those key policies that you had talked about on the campaign trail, including a act that is meant to help agriculture within the state be more independent from the federal system. This would be allowing it to not necessarily have to deal with as many regulations. It would be something to the effect of a state sovereignty agricultural act. And this would be to really reduce the amount of overreach and control the federal government has over it. Now, as Governor Smith, that's what I'm taking on. Well, thank you, my good friend from the Nebraska Times. I appreciate your question. And there has been many, many topics that I've talked about on the trail that I plan to implement getting in there. I love our great farmers in Nebraska. There is no doubt that they are a segment of the population who really got me across the line and are willing to engage in productive dialogue. And I feel as though we want to foster their independence, just like we want to foster independence on all sorts of fronts, whether it be in infrastructure, whether it be in the energy production, so we don't have to rely on our neighboring states like Oklahoma or to the further south down from Texas where they have a lot of energy infrastructure. We want to have our own strong energy infrastructure so we can support all the families growing here in Nebraska and ensure that they have access to all the different technology that will propel them forward into the future. This is a project that I also talked about, and I want to really focus on it. I'm going to be calling it the Energy Independence Infrastructure Fund, and we will have a investment portfolio essentially that goes into operations such as natural gas, nuclear power, clean coal. These are the things that will allow us to propel our economy and ensure that the next generation of Nebraskans are actually able to fend for themselves, are able to be independent of any interference from the federal government. And this is something that we go over all the time in my lecture series, Freedom and Prosperity, Securing the Future of Our State. And this is from my time when I was at the Nebraska Lincoln University, and I was giving this speech to all of my students, how you make Nebraska free again and able to take on the burden of supporting its people while allowing them to prosper. So thank you for your questions, so on and so forth. That's how the dip and dive segment goes. This one was a little bit longer than normal, but with that said, if you liked it, you throw ideas down in the comment section. I always like to hear new ideas. It's been a while since we've done Dip, Dive, and Dodge, but we're doing a little bit of a fun Friday kind of thing. And obviously, I love alliteration, so it all works out. But let's jump into our actual story from today, which comes from Daily Signal. The headline reads, Coalition of Conservative Leaders Urge Senate to Fight Supreme Court Packing. Now, you may be sitting back saying, well, of course, they don't want the Supreme Court to be packed underneath Joe Biden. And I'm going to sit there right there with you and say, that definitely makes sense. Why would they want to give over the power that the Supreme Court has in order to rein in the executive overreach and even to resolve conflicts between Congress and the presidency when you have parties that are constantly putting more power into the presidency? No one wants to give up that sort of control, or at least ability to check the executive as it continues to grow to any branch of government that they can't directly influence or control. So that is always something we want to push back against. But what they're actually proposing here is not the simple, oh, just make sure it doesn't happen. They actually want to propose a amendment. Let's actually go into one of the quotes from the second paragraph. Quote, with the recent election representing a resounding rejection of such proposals, the letter to U.S. Senators says, it is time for the Congress and the states to preserve the integrity and independence of the Supreme Court through a constitutional amendment, limiting the number of justices on the court to 9. And the coalition has a whole bunch of big names on there, whether it be Americans Defending Freedom, there are other members who are big in politics, whether it be on the advocacy side or whether it just be large names who are getting behind it. You have groups like Advancing American Freedom. You have the director of Keep 9 Coalition, which is Mark Wheat. You have Roman Buehler, the Students for Life Action president, Kristen Hawkins. Sorry, I put them in the wrong order there. So Mark Wheat is for Advancing American Freedom. The director of Keep 9 Coalition, Roman Buehler. Kristen Hawkins, the CEO for Concerned Women of America, Penny Nancy. All these different I would say large and prominent figures coming out and making sure that their voices are heard, that they are not just looked over, and that the court is not packed. And now, obviously, all these people have different goals here. Advancing American Freedom probably has a little bit more of their eye on the economic side of things. Keep 9 Coalition is a legal society that probably doesn't want the majority to change. Obviously, Kristen Hawkins is there to make sure that the pro-life decisions don't get overturned and Roe v. Wade or something akin to it doesn't come back into power. Probably the same, relatively the same for Concerned Women for America, but that could also be on issues of biological men and biological women going and using different facilities of the opposite sex. So there are lots of different reasons all of these people would want to keep in the majority as it is, but I can tell you now that all of them coming together on this issue, it is resounding. Now, will the Senate actually do anything on this one? I don't normally like to err on the side of action. I like to, when it comes to the government, I like to err on the side of inaction, and I honestly like it when it is inactive. But I think there is a opportunity here to at least try to get a constitutional amendment in front of the states. I don't know if there will be enough states to actually pass it, but I would hope that we can at least get it to that point, because it would show that, one, this constitutional amendment process still works, because it's been a long time since we've actually been able to get a constitutional amendment in front of the states. A lot of the times it just dies in committee, or it dies in some random bill or some random proposal that one senator or congressman puts out there. The point I'm getting at is I think it could be very, very important to show that this process still works. Honestly, it is the ultimate check on any sort of overreach within the government in theory, because it is both the federal system and the sovereign states coming together in order to codify the law of the land and possibly take back some power from or remove restrictions that have been put in previously, such as abolition, or in some cases to right injustices, whether it be the amendments passed after the Civil War in order to confirm desegregation and to codify equal rights explicitly by race, or whether it be giving women the right to vote. All these sort of mechanisms and tools have been used in the past in order to level the playing field, in order to keep the system in check and make sure that it's not being unfair. And I think you can make a good argument for allowing or making the justices, the judicial branch, be restricted to a certain number. Now, do I know that particular number? No, I don't actually think it matters right now. If you're going to go purely based off the argument that you need to keep things fair and equal, and you can't just simply add justices whenever you get into power in order to get your way, I think that that would be the way to go about it. What do I think is the actual best solution? A different solution? I know you didn't ask. You're probably sitting there saying, Alex, I don't care. But I want to hear your opinions as well. But my opinion is that you have one that is directly proportional to the population of U.S. citizens. So anybody who comes here illegally does not count. Anybody that becomes a full U.S. citizen, that they count. Anybody who's a natural born citizen, they count. And there are maybe a few little exceptions there. People that still pay taxes and are governed by the rules and maybe living on a green card, these sort of small exceptions, or working permits, working visas here. I think you could make an argument for that, but the visa one is a little bit more lackluster. But my point being that you have it directly proportional to the population, and you say that you cannot simply add one whenever you want. You have to go through a bipartisan commission when a certain threshold is hit. So say the population right now, I believe it's somewhere around 330 million. Last time I checked, it was 327 million there for a while. So I'm going to round up to 330 million. Let's say it's 330 million. You hit a threshold of 350 million, you can add one justice, and then it has to go through not a bipartisan Senate, it has to go through a bipartisan commission, which has its people picked out every 4 years or every 2 years. So then throughout the course of different terms, you can actually level it out a little bit. And that's in order to always be prepared in case there is a Supreme Court crisis, or they hit the threshold and the president wants to appoint someone new, and they have to, and these can be closed door meetings if they so choose. They can be open door meetings, but this sort of system that actually makes it proportional to the amount of people within the United States, though that's not required in order to make sure that the judges are impartial. I think it allows for a mechanism for the court to continue to grow naturally, and also to have protections in there against politicization, while also allowing the court to change leanings every once in a while in order to satisfy both sides and make them feel as though they have an investment in this new pie that we're creating here, this new system, in order to make sure that the judicial branch continues to prosper and thrive. Now, I understand that's not what they're actually getting at here, and I want to know your thoughts. Is the one I suggested better, worse, or the suggestions that they gave phenomenal, and you just say, yeah, codify it at 9, lock it in at 9, and that's all we ever need? I think if you do that, I think you need to have something else that allows for change rather than lifetime appointments. Now, you may be saying, well, why? You want to be able to leave an impact beyond your presidency. You want to have the court as a catch-all. It will be the bastion of older thinking in some cases, because so many people stay on there for so long. And that is fair enough. But also what I mentioned about the buy-in, a process that allows for there to be some natural change rather than simply when people retire or when people pass away. This sort of buy-in system allows for people to have hope that it could possibly change in the future. It also allows a balance of the opinions on the court for quite some time, rather than it being locked forever. Now, I understand that people already believe the judicial branch is completely politicized, and in that case, you wouldn't want to allow that, because it would end very, very badly, in that the judges are already acting like politicians to some degree, coming down on their own political side. But I think to some degree you have Alito, who normally toes the line, Clarence Thomas, who normally toes the line, but Kavanaugh and even Comey Barrett broke from the conservative ranks. You had Ketanji Brown Jackson has broken from the liberal ranks more than once. So I feel as though simply label it as a corrupt system or a already partisan system is to miss some of the, I don't like using this word haphazardly, but it misses some of the nuance. And that's not to say, oh, nuance, it's so nuanced. No, there is genuine parsing that all of these judges do when going through their opinions. Just because they all agree or they say, I'm a part of the majority, that doesn't mean they don't write adjoining opinions. It doesn't mean that they don't add something unique to the perspective. And it doesn't mean that just because they're all dissenting doesn't mean that they all agree on the same dissent or dissent for the same reason. So there's a lot at play here, and there's a lot of room for growth and buy-in if you have a system that actually allows justices to recycle a little bit faster. Now, you could argue that that's going to actually keep them from upholding old norms because they constantly have an inflow of people with new opinions who are younger, who have been cultured or at least socialized in the newer way of things rather than the older way of things, which is fair enough. That we could possibly create some protections for that. But I think I would rather implement a system like that and deal with those consequences later on than simply stop and not be able to find a solution at all, because we know Washington loves to be deadlocked at the end of the day. But with that said, like I said, throw your comments in the comment section. We're going to jump into our daily delight. This story comes from Animals Around the Globe. Alf, the cross-eyed cat turned employee at clinic. And honestly, when I saw this cat photo, I was laughing my absolute butt off. I was wondering what is going on here. I thought it was photoshopped. He is a funny guy going around trying to help his fellow animals and making the clinic staff the clinic staff laugh. And if you want to have a good chuckle, if you want to have a smile on your face before you leave, I would say go check out this article. The links will be in the description below that like and subscribe button, also for the other article we talked about today. Also down there, if you want to find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. And if you stick around here or the RSS feed on Tuesday and Thursday, you'll also find 6 and 6. It's 6 stories from around the world. It's international news, and all of it's done in less than 6 minutes. So, with all of that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.